What is love? In the pre-modern era, love was seen to be this glorious, magical, mystical experience that was unique to the individual. It was deemed to be unexplainable and something that took someone's breath away or swept them off their feet. People truly believed that falling in love was once in a lifetime. However, in the modern age, the view of what love has drastically changed. It has been reduced to a science. Love has been rationalized to a means to increase well-being or a tool for the survival of the species or simply as a chemical reaction in the brain.
Let's first examine rationalization of love based on psychology. When looking at Sigmund Freud's interpretation through the Oedipal conflict, we notice that love is presented as the reenactment of an early childhood conflict. The idea of love has already been predetermined through a child's relationship with their parents at an early age, and later on, plastic relationships are formed. What are plastic relationships? It is essentially based off the needs and psychological desire of that individual, which can in turn be thought of as a relationship that is shaped differently person by person. Overall plasticity is portrayed through the love as a tool used to shape a person into their best self in order to cope with their conflicting childhood trauma. Since love can be thought of as a catalyst in a relationship, it really loses that special value and is used to increase a person's psyche. All in all, relationships are formed in order to increase autonomy through self-control over oneself. Love is basically just a means to an end of increasing self-worth, not some magical experience. How selfish do you feel now?
Moving on to another way that love is more of a tool than some spiritual practice. Evolutionary psychologists have rationalized romantic love down to a solution to a problem of commitment within our species to make sure that the human race survives. Love is not some magical entity, yet it is a functional necessity that creates companionship so that women and men do not walk out on one another to instill a desire to reproduce. Since humans are not like other animals that simply ensure the survival of the species merely through sex and reproduction, love has served as a tool for cooperation between males and females within the species. The feeling of commitment and companionship is a byproduct of love, which in the long run yields to reproduction, hence the survival of the species. Therefore, overall love has to do with the species and not the individual. It deflates the unique aspect and transcendent feeling of falling in love. AKA, evolutionary psychologists are saying that your love for one another is actually not that special, but is just part of a bigger picture. Sorry.
The biological aspect of love is perceived as a form of disenchantment and as a chemical reaction that involuntarily takes place in our brains. Biological love is looked at as a somatic way of thinking about ourselves and our feelings toward other people via chemical connections. So when we think of the magical feeling of love we experience with our significant other, it's just an involuntary reaction of the brain. Sorry, not really. But many hormones are emitted like testosterone, estrogen, and norepinephrine to name a few. Let's examine dopamine, for example. Dopamine is a neurotransmitter that is typically active during the attraction phase of a relationship. Love at first sight is actually nothing but just your brain going through an uncontrolled chemical process. Even in our daily lives, we see the topic of love expressed in common TV shows like Grey's Anatomy. Despite the main purpose of the show revolving around a clinical practice, the subplot tends to rely heavily on the concept of love in a biological perspective. For example, Christina wishes to set up her ex-husband on a dating platform that is similar to screening patients for clinical trials where all the biological data is present, and through this, a suitable partner is determined.
So what have we learned today? Through examining love by evolutionary, psychological, and biological aspects, we now have a better understanding of the rationalization of love. More importantly, your perception of love isn't really that special, because at the end of the day, it has to do with unresolved mommy issues.